can you do? Welcome to the first in a series of Facebook Live advice sessions hosted by Attitude Magazine. This new endeavor is part of Attitude's ongoing efforts to support readers during the pandemic. For more resources, please visit attitudemag.com/tag/coronavirus. Though today's session is only it's 30 minutes, we invite you to submit your topics. We invite you to submit your questions on topics of concern to you right now regarding the coronavirus, whether it's easing back into life as it's happening in your community, or on other challenges you're facing right now with your ADHD son or daughter. I encourage you to please submit your questions as we go. I have the chat section open, and I look forward to hearing from you. If you're there, please let me know how you're doing and who you are and where you're hailing from. It would be great. I'm going to attempt to answer some of your questions towards the end of this session. So please type them away. I look forward to reading them and getting to them as we move along. So today we're going to talk about what it's like and some of the concerns that parents are having about easing back into life after COVID. So I want to start with one comment here. My 7-year-old daughter has anxiety with ADHD and does not like the thought of the lockdown ending. She will not go anywhere outside of the house. How can I help her feel more comfortable? Well, this is a great question because a lot of times anxiety does travel with ADHD. In fact, 34% of kids who have ADHD also have coexisting anxiety. So how can we help our kids readjust to actually leaving the house and going out in the world and understanding what the new definition of safety is? I think it's really important that we take some time and explain to our children how the virus is communicated and what kinds of safety measures you're taking for yourself and you would like to take for them as well. This will mean not only using masks, but using hand sanitizer and social distancing. We're all trying to figure this out. And so I think what's important for kids who are anxious is they have a worst case scenario in their head. We want to try to understand what this worst case scenario is and how we can sort of unpack the steps and the details of that worst case scenario. What are they afraid of? What are some of the thoughts they have? What are some of the preventions that you're taking as a family to help with this? So I think that's really important to go over with your kids. I think it's also important to lay out different scenarios and to start small. So rather than say, okay, we're going to the grocery store, that's a big step. Why don't we work on walking down the street, or maybe having a neighbor come draw some chalk lines that are 6 feet apart in your driveway and have them talk to each other. Start small and then engage in the world. And I just want to welcome some people who are signing in on the chat. Florence and Christina, Susan, welcome. It's great to have you. Thanks for joining. So let's talk about the second question. Due to the impulsive nature of my twin 10-year-old sons with ADHD, you're a busy parent, I'm concerned about letting them go into stores due to touching items and then touching their faces. How can I let them back into society and make sure they are safe without supervising them 24/7? Well, this is another fantastic question because we don't want to micromanage our kids, and yet we're not sure. We're not sure how to help them interact with people. We're not sure that they'll follow the guidelines when they're not with us. So we have to start with modeling. And that means that we want to go with them into smaller places where we can actually supervise them. We want to show them about hand sanitizer. Give them a hand sanitizer to put in their pocket if you may. Have wipes available. Teach them about touching things and then, not touching their faces. Of course, they'll be wearing masks. I think it's also important to understand what the limits of contagion really are. We don't want to drive ourselves crazy with our desire to be safe, and we also want to be safe. So I think that it's important to sort of explain the rules, expect that they may test those rules, perhaps in ways that we're not terrifically comfortable with. But rather than yelling at them all the time, we want to try to come up with some code words. So you're not on their case all the time, but you're saying, elephant. Oh, okay, elephant, whatever that is, or whatever your code word is, so that they are a little bit more careful with where they're placing themselves, their hands, and their bodies. Here's a third comment. I finally have a school routine and rhythm with my 13-year-old daughter in this lockdown. Way to go! Congratulations. As a parent or adult with ADHD, I'm not ready to change that. I bet you're not. It probably took a lot for you to get that together. And I don't think it will be good for her either. What should I do? Also, another great question. I love these fantastic questions I'm getting from all of you. This is really tricky. So kids with ADHD really benefit from routine. Adults with ADHD really benefit from routine. So we want to maintain the routines that you've come up with. Just because the world is kind of opening up a little bit and we're trying to see what that's like, your child most likely is not going back to school, and you may or may not be returning to work, which is something we can talk about a little bit later. So what you want to do is keep your routines in place. Perhaps you want to add in an outing to the grocery store or to get ice cream or something like that. But the routine that you've established is really important, and it's grounding for you, but it's also grounding for your daughter. Don't give that up. You may just need to add some tweaks in there. Hold on to what's working, because we don't exactly know what's going to happen as things open up, and we may face another lockdown relatively soon. Experts are predicting that things will go like this for a while. So hold on to what you're doing. Perhaps add in a new thing or two, see how that goes, and then reevaluate. One father writes, my anxiety is increasing as we are a month away from finishing school in Florida, and I'm transitioning my return to work. So I'm not sure if this person is anxious about them being, in at work and being being contaminated, or that they're not going to be around to interact with and supervise their kids in the homework or the home chores. So I'm going to speculate and go with maybe each one of those. It's natural to feel anxious right now. I have to admit that I woke up this morning at 6 feeling a little anxious. I watched the CNN town hall last night, and maybe that wasn't a great idea, because I woke up and I was like, whoa, I don't know, like what's going to happen. It's a nervous time. So it's okay to be anxious, and it's okay for your kids to be anxious. Let's normalize that. Let's acknowledge that that's real, that we have some worry. That doesn't mean we're going to not do anything. We're going to do things safely and thoughtfully, but we have that. And so if you're nervous about going back to work because maybe your middle school or your high school will now be home for most of the day alone, that's a reasonable fear. And it's worth talking about with other family members or a partner how you're going to manage that open time, effectively, so it's not, screens 24/7 and perhaps some inappropriate behavior as well. If you're worried about your own contamination by going back to work, then I think it's important that you really follow the CDC guidelines. They came out with a great 17-page pamphlet that's on their website of how you can, monitor yourself and go back to your place of work safely. This will, of course, mean frequent hand washing, sanitizing, wearing a mask. It's frightening, I think, for a lot of us to think about venturing from the safe cocoons of our homes into the world. And so we want to do it slowly and thoughtfully. And I'm going to move forward with some questions that were from last time. These are about motivation and doing school at home. But I want to encourage you to please use the chat section on your Facebook page, on the Facebook page, to send me some of your concerns about transitioning back in the world, or some of the challenges you've had this week at home, and ask for my help. That's why I'm here. One parent asks, can you please speak to motivating a child who has ADHD and finds online learning too isolating and boring and really doesn't like school anyway? Yes, I will. So as we know, kids with ADHD lack dopamine and norepinephrine, these two neurotransmitters that are really important. And norepinephrine also often has to do with sleep and alertness in the brain. And dopamine has to do with interest and reward, and is deeply connected to motivation. And so that means that ADHD brains make less dopamine and less norepinephrine. So it's harder for them to work up the interest, the oomph, to do things that that they don't find compelling. And so while this may be hard for neurotypical kids, they have enough dopamine to help them push through it because they can kind of see the end of the line. For kids with ADHD and their now not now brains, they can't see past the fact that right now is miserable. And so it's hard to predict, to focus on predicting, oh, I'm going to feel better when I get this math worksheet done, because doing the math worksheet right now is so intolerable. What we have to do is, first of all, validate online learning is isolating and it is more boring. Your kids are not getting cues from their peers in their classrooms about how to stay focused, about what to pay attention to. They can't turn to a friend and ask them for help on a particular question. And they don't have the little chit chat that they do all day long that kind of keeps them going and engaged, and is one of the reasons so many kids with ADHD like going to school, to see their friends, right? They don't have those things. So we're asking them to actually do stuff they don't enjoy in an environment they don't find particularly compelling. So the way that you're going to motivate kids is by using incentives. And that's incentives that matter. And using timed work periods with restorative breaks. These are breaks that kind of help them move along the work that they have to do. So what I'm talking about is setting up a work period for a particular amount of time that you and your child have discussed in advance about how long we can actually focus and do something, and then have a little break that is restorative, movement, food, water, and then again, some more studying. So I'm getting some comments. I want to work with those comments. So what I'm seeing is that parents are unsure about how much routine is appropriate during the summer when kids need a break but may not have camps or other activities to act as organizing forces. How do we make summer more fun but not a video game free-for-all? This is a really good question. Unfortunately, so many camps have been canceled or are canceling themselves. And so we are now faced with situations where our kids will be home without structure and without activity for days on end. Now, I think that it makes sense that some kids want to have time during their summer to do nothing. That's important. Or to do whatever comes, what inspires them. Maybe play some art, maybe play some music, do some art, shoot some hoops. These are things that kids want to do. And if you if you can get some gloves and you wear a mask, you might be able to do that. Keep distance. Each child can have their own basketball. But I think some routine is important. Pick a time that's a reasonable amount of time to wake up in the morning. Pick some kind of activity that you might want to do. And if you're a parent and you're working, see if you can set up an exchange with another parent. Maybe one parent would set up some sort of online activity for your child and their child, maybe baking, maybe Lego, maybe watching a movie together through a screen share. And then you could pick up a time to switch. So try to join with some households. If there's a way to social distance and get together, I've seen teens do all kinds of creative things, sit in cars that are 6 feet apart, have chairs that are six feet apart. We want to try to get kids outside and moving. That's a really important part of the summer. So I think while there may not be formal organized activities, you can make some agreements. Every day we're going to do something outside, and that would probably be good for you as well as for them. And I encourage you to think about how you might create a community of some other parents whose kids are around and how these kids can connect with each other. Barbara says, I have a 16-year-old with ADHD and severe anxiety. He is afraid to even go outside. Oh, I'm so sorry. How can I prepare him to get ready to go back to school in the fall? He simply refuses even to try to sit on the deck out back. Well, it sounds like he's really struggling. And first of all, Barbara, I want to encourage you to talk to his pediatrician, because there is a difference between what we consider to be typical anxiety and atypical anxiety. And your son may be falling into that atypical anxiety range, in which case some therapy or some medication might be useful. In the meantime, perhaps sitting outside is too much of an ask. Remember that when a task seems too big, people will avoid it or procrastinate. So maybe for him, just opening the window might be enough to start with. Maybe opening the door, having the air come in, closing the door. Start small and do that small thing every day to acclimate him to this particular step. Then come up with a second step. And I would encourage you to work with him to create these steps, because eventually, hopefully, God willing, we will have kids back in school in the fall, and he will need to return. So we want to start with small steps just to get him open to some air. And then maybe sit outside. Work a little bit at a time. And by the way, he's highly intelligent. Of course. One thing has nothing to do with the other. So use facts. Help him use some facts, because actually the facts are that fresh air is very good for the system in a whole lot of ways. Michelle, thank you. You're welcome. She says, this is amazing. I can't thank you enough. You are most welcome. My daughter's almost 14. She's until recently, my daughter is 14, and until recently, she has always excelled in school. So I'm new to the ADHD world. Thank you. Well, welcome. And having ADHD and excelling at school are not mutually exclusive. Kids can do both. And right now, many kids are struggling with school. Kids who liked school are struggling, and kids who dislike school are struggling. Online learning is not super compelling, and it's continuing for several weeks. A lot of kids are losing steam. Lisa asks, should I let my 6th grade son fail school because his grades were already going downhill, and he tried raising them before schools closed and did make improvement, but now I'm worried he won't be done to raise them enough in the last week of school left now. So I think it's important to help your son figure out what needs to happen for him to finish school, and get your school on board to give him some extra time. Kids with ADHD right now need more time. They have big feelings. They may process information more slowly because they're a little depressed or they're, extra anxious. And so if your son has a 504 or an IEP, or if he doesn't, he's in elementary school, and elementary schools often make accommodations that they don't formally write up. Ask for some extension. Talk with him and them together about what he actually can do, what needs to get done to pass sixth grade. I think he'll feel pretty bad about himself if he doesn't pass, particularly because he tried raising his grades before school closed, which indicates to me that he wants to pass. He wants to do better, but he's feeling like the hurdles are too great right now. Florence asks, what is some verbiage I can use to teach my boy that what I'm saying is serious and it's not silly time? He will repeat after me and giggle and will hide and wiggly and squirmy and engage in pesky behavior. I currently say, look at my face. It doesn't match your silliness. I'm serious. Look at my serious face. But it's not resonating, maybe with time, but I want to ask for some feedback from you to get him to snap out of it. So I would practice with him what I call the rule of three. And what this is he looks at you and you say, your eyes on my eyes, and you state what you want him to hear, and you ask him to state it back. I would take out all of the stuff about the seriousness and the wiggly, squirmy, whatever. That's secondary. What you want to know is that he's understood what you're saying to him. So this is where the rule of three works. Part one, step one, you make eye contact, perhaps putting a hand on his shoulder, that you're connected to him. Two, you state what you want him to know. And then three, he repeats it back to you, not once, but twice, so that you know he's gotten it. I think it's great to say, look at my face. What is my face showing you right now? And you just stick with that. He's squirmy and wiggly and pesky behavior. He can't manage himself. This will come with time. Right now, he's showing you with his behavior that he's distracted and feeling out of control and all over the place. So sometimes this, making a connection and perhaps putting a hand on his shoulder, not grabbing him, but just gently making contact, can help him slow down. You also could do some alternate nostril breathing to help him slow down before you talk to him. Remember, it's breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and you do this 3 to 5 times. Hi, Louise. Nice to see you here. Sherry, my son's appointments to start medication is May 26th. Is there anything I can do to prepare him for the appointment? In his last appointment, he refused to engage with a doctor at all. This is a different doctor. I didn't like the first one either. Sherry, it would help me to give you some good support if I knew how old your son was. I think the question I would want to ask is, what is satisfactory engagement for this type of appointment? A lot of times in medical appointments with psychiatrists, what happens is there's the adults and the child and the psychiatrist or the prescriber or the pediatrician, whoever that is, and the adults talk about the child in the third person. And that feels bad to kids. And so what we want to do is we want to ask him a question or two that he would actually be capable of answering. And he's young, he's 6 3/4. So how much engagement do we want to expect from a child of 6 3/4? Perhaps hello, perhaps some description of something that he likes doing. He's not actually going to be able to articulate a lot about his thoughts and feelings. So 1 or 2 questions might be reasonable. And then the rest of the time, perhaps he can sit out with one parent while another parent's in the meeting. Or if he's comfortable playing on the floor while you talk with the prescriber and he's there, he will listen and he will pipe up when he has something to say. Just be aware that he's listening as you're talking about him. So, Tanya asks, hello, we face a lot of situations where my 11-year-old with ADHD will do something, say something, but when his siblings do the same, he can't handle it. Um, I think what you're saying is that he does things that may be or say things that are inappropriate, and when his siblings do it, he overreacts, but he expects that they understand him, and I think that's actually pretty interesting. I'd want to know what is distressing to him about why it's distressing to him about what his siblings are doing, if he sees a connection between what he's doing and what they're doing, and if there's an agreement that perhaps if that's a behavior that's annoying to everyone, that might be the number one thing that you decide to work on as a family right now. It helps if the family's working on one issue, even though that issue may look different for different people, because then you can sort of launch some success on that one issue, and people can start to see that things are changing and improving. That's very rewarding for kids. And I think it would also help your child with ADHD feel uh, less like a target, or when his siblings are doing this. Erica, I'm an adult who slipped through the cracks as a child with ADHD. I didn't get diagnosed until age 24. Now I'm 48. I want to return to school, but I have problems with comprehension. What can I do to help me learn? Well, Erica, this is first of all, I want to say congratulations. I'm really excited to hear that you're going back to school to try to learn and develop something that matters to you. And also how frustrating not to be diagnosed till 24. I imagine that you endured a lot of school and social experiences that were probably pretty challenging and sometimes painful for you. What you are entitled to as an adult, particularly if you've had psychoeducational testing, are accommodations. I think it's really important. Most colleges, most schools offer accommodations to students who meet the requirements for learning disabilities, and you should seek out that center of your school to make sure that you're getting the adequate support. And that would include tutoring and other kinds of academic support. I work with an adult who is in school getting a master's, and they're entitled to note taking. And they had a project that they were working on. Actually, recently it was an oral history project, and they interviewed someone, and then they had to transcribe the tape, which was really, really difficult for them. And they kept struggling. They couldn't do it. They were procrastinating. And finally, I said, do you have accommodations with your college? And they said, oh, yes, I have a note taker. And I was like, oh my gosh, you have a note taker. You don't have to do this task. You're entitled because of the disability law to basically send it off to one of these online transcriptions, have them do the bulk of the transcribing, and then you can add in the nuances. And this person was so sure that they weren't allowed to do that. So I, as their therapist, helped them craft a letter, and they sent it to the professor, and the professor was, oh, of course. So figure out what your rights are. If you haven't had ed psych testing, try to get some done, and make sure that you are getting the accommodations you need at school. Renee asks, how do you suggest handling a 5.5-year-old's big emotions, especially towards his sisters? He always thinks they are being mean to him when they tell him no. He is very overwhelming to both his older 12-year-old and younger 4-year-old sisters. We have had so much time together, and they haven't had a lot of space. Doing my best to keep the peace, but it's been a challenge, especially without school. Well, of course it is. He is 5.5, but we want to remember that the ADHD brain, those connections from the frontal lobes to the back of the brain, and the way the brain matures, is up to a 3-year lag in maturity. So in some ways, he's actually younger than his 4-year-old sister. He has big feelings like so many kids with ADHD. And that's because emotional control is deeply tied to working memory and impulse control. And these executive functioning skills are just now taking shape for him, and he's learning how to he's just learning what it means to manage them. When kids have big feelings, they are sensitive and they hear things that are delivered perhaps in a neutral or strong way as very rejecting, mean, aggressive, and loud. It would be helpful to ask your son to look at the face of his sisters to help him understand their words. We want to help kids connect facial expressions with words and tone of voice. This would be important, and you're going to have to come back to it many times because he's struggling right now, particularly with all of the time you've had together. It's overwhelming, and perhaps it would be useful to institute some alone time in the family. Perhaps everybody's on a screen, but everyone is away from each other for a particular period of time doing their own thing so they can recover and, regroup within themselves. I'm going to take, I have a couple more questions, so there's several here. I'm going to stop in a few minutes. It's great to have all these questions. Thank you. Erica, nope, sorry. Nikki asks, I have a 5-year-old with ADHD and ODD. How do I explain this to his teenage brother who doesn't understand why he acts the way they do? I think it's really important, rather than talking about the ADHD or ODD, to talk about the behavior and the kind of brain that your 5-year-old has. He has a busy brain. He has a fast brain. He has big feelings that are like tidal waves, and he doesn't have the brain capacity, the cognition yet to manage those big feelings. A teenager will understand this cognitively, and perhaps when your younger son is in bed, sit down with your teen son, go onto the Attitude website, get some information. What is ADHD? What is ODD? What's happening in the brain? This will help him have a little compassion. He also needs limits set with his brother, and he needs to know how he can set appropriate limits with his brother without being mean. But there have to be some boundaries. How can we help our daughter navigate her perfectionistic tendencies along with the procrastination of ADHD? I call this perfectionism procrastination, and particularly girls with ADHD are excellent at it. She seems to need the adrenaline rush of the last minute, but then runs out of time to do it and on the high standards that she sets for herself. So one of the things with perfectionism procrastination is that people set a goal for themselves that is absolutely unattainable. So we want to lower our standards a little bit. A lot of kids with ADHD wait till the last minute, till that heat is under them, and then their adrenaline kicks in and they're getting stuff done. The problem with that is they don't produce the quality of work that they want to or that they think they're capable of. So we need to help her with some backwards design. When is a task due? How can you get started on a small part of this task? We're going to break this task down into chunks. You're going to do this chunk here and this chunk here so that she can start to see that she's on her way towards doing it. Then we can edit the task, or we'll have time to tweak it so that it feels good to her. If perfectionism is important to her, she'll want it to look her best. So work with breaking it down and using backwards design, estimating how long each chunk will take to finish the whole. Crystal, my son is 6 and refuses to take his medication. At home, I've called the police, and they've explained this isn't their job since school is out. We have done our best to cope with behaviors and mood swings, although he becomes angry and hits and pushes. He tears things up. He doesn't want to participate. We've tried making homework a contest and fun. Well, it seems to me that you are really struggling right now, and your son is really struggling. And I'm not, I don't know how you approach your medication at home. I think if you could call it a focus pill or not get angry less often pill, I'm sure he doesn't like that feeling of being out of control. What doesn't he like about taking his medication? Does he dislike the taste? Does he dislike the texture? Can you work with your prescriber to get this medication in a form that's more tolerable to him? It's difficult to be able to have to watch him all the time, and you want to you want to sort of establish what appropriate activities and behaviors are in the family. So I think that I would really encourage you to check out some of the attitude articles and webinars on ADHD, and kids and medication, and also how to set limits that with a child who's this young. Remember, he's 6, but in a lot of ways developmentally he's 3, and you're seeing a lot of that 3-year-old behavior right now because kids are stressed. Young children are not able to continue to hold it together so much at home. They don't have school. They don't understand what's going on. So much has changed for them, and they just cannot comprehend it. Um, uh, I am not going to speak about rejection sensitivity dysphoria right now, Florence, because I don't have a lot of time, but I'm happy to do this next week. And I have so many more questions here. So it is 4:36. I'll go for 4 more minutes. We're supposed to stop at 4:30. I'll go for 4 more minutes, and then I encourage you to come back next week at 4 with your questions, and we'll tackle them again. I do take private messages. Someone asked about that. If you want to contact me, please feel free to contact me via my website, drsharonsaline.com, or my private Facebook page at Dr. Sharon Saline. Stephanie says, my 10-year-old daughter and I both have ADHD, and we are usually very close. This being home all day on top of each other while I work, and she uses way more electronics than usual, is not working. It's so difficult. And I want to tell you, this is a common refrain I hear from so many parents and kids with ADHD. We've tried loose routines and low expectations. We've tried more routines and higher expectations. She's resisting everything. And I'm overreacting to everything. So much damage is being done in such a short time. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear this. My heart is breaking. My poor executive functioning, lack of organizing, and both are big feelings in the mix, and I feel hopeless and at odds. Okay, Stephanie, here's what I want to say to you. What is the most important thing right now? Your relationship with your daughter. So what we want to do is inject fun and closeness and take out some of the things that are causing conflict. Make a baseline of what is the minimum stuff that she's got to do for school or got to do for home, and set up some agreements around that. And then have some time where you're just doing some fun stuff, whatever that is. Planting, if you live in a house and you have a garden, plant some vegetables. Plant some flowers. If you are in an apartment, get a pot. Put something in there so you can watch it grow together. Cook, watch a movie, make popcorn, learn, do silly art projects if she likes that. Ride your bike. Work on your relationship. It is the most important thing. The rest of the stuff is all recuperable. Okay? Your daughter loves you. She's frustrated. You love her, you're frustrated. You've got work to do, and she is at the end of her rope. Set up work periods, and if she finishes and she's bothering you, let her go on screens. Get your stuff done so you can be with her, and give yourself a break. Right now is not the time to hold yourself to the perfect parent standards, okay? Just do the best you can. Michelle, my son is almost 12 and going into puberty. He has moments where he becomes very emotional, either by shouting, crying, or being horrible towards his 5-year-old brother. This behavior has definitely become worse in the last few months, possibly due to hormones. Good chance. He's on meds for ADHD. How can I, as a parent, handle these emotions when they kick in? Well, the first thing that you want to do is hold on to yourself. Keep yourself regulated. And I would say this is also true for you, Stephanie. Figure out what's going to help you manage yourself. and write those things down. Is it a bath at night? Is it stepping outside for some air, drinking a glass of water, listening to the same song over and over again on your phone? Figure out what's going to really help you stay grounded. Wash your face. Put some Post-its in your bedroom of things you want to say to yourself that are encouraging. When your child is going through puberty, they are experiencing all kinds of roller coaster emotions, and their brain and their body, it's a soup of all kinds of chemicals that are shifting. It's uncomfortable for them. And because it's uncomfortable for them, he's going to take it out on his younger brother because he can. Because he can do an intellectual and physical dance around that smaller brother. You've got to set some limits about what's okay and what's not okay. And his younger brother will learn to stick up for himself. And it might be worth helping him come up with some things to say to his older brother. Try to encourage appropriate behavior by rewarding your older son for doing something nice for your younger son. You know, if you read or you play a game with him, you can have an extra 10 minutes of X, Y, or Z. That will incentivize him to be kind and to what I call, you know, it's like reaching out a little bit. Give him a few crumbs. It makes so much, it matters so much to him, and it's not a whole lot of skin off your back. Okay, I'm just gonna do Christy. I waited till the age of 52 to throw in the towel and ask for help and take a prescription. I'm letting my son know I waited so long, and this site is so helpful and informative. I love this site. It gave me courage and let me let go of shame. I'm in recovery and have been for 31 years. Woo! All right, Christy, way to go. Way to go. All right, and Phaedra asks one more question. Should we give up the e-learning at this point? My sixth graders teachers have been non-existent, relying on pre-canned long video lessons and pass-fail quizzes. I'm ready to have my daughter, quote, fail school so her sanity comes back. It is destroying our family. I think that that these two polls, that's not a fair. Those aren't good options. It can't be one or the other. There's got to be a third option. And if the sixth grade teachers are not pulling their weight, I would contact the support services of your local school district, the principal, the superintendent. Go as high as you need to go. Failing school should not be the option because the teachers are not doing their job. Crystal says, applesauce, pudding, and popsicles. He does taste them on popsicles. So I would encourage you, Crystal, in terms of getting your son to take the medication, to try anything, whether that's yogurt, ice cream, a little bit of chocolate sauce, whatever it's going to take to help your son take that medication. We've got to get it down into his system so he can be his brain can get the assistance it needs so it can function effectively and smoothly. Well, I've gone over by 12 minutes. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I will spell my name again. My name is Dr. Sharon, SHARON. Saline. My website is www.drsharonsaline.com, and my Facebook page is at drsharonsaline.com. Thank you so much for joining us on these series of Facebook Live advice sessions hosted by Attitude. Again, this is a new endeavor that's part of Attitude's ongoing efforts to support readers and families during this pandemic. For more resources, please visit attitudemag.com/tag/coronavirus, or just search the library of Attitude's many, many fabulous resources. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week for those of you who want to come back at 4 p.m. Have a good day and a nice weekend. And happy Mother's Day to all of you who are celebrating.